There's a cat over here. There's a cat over there. And the wrong one died. And the wrong one died.
Welcome to The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. I'm your host, Mike Abrams, and today we have another amazing. You'll be seeing her in Andrew Lloyd Webber's new Broadway show, Bad Cinderella, but before that, she was Demeter in the 2016 Broadway Revival of CATS. So welcome, Robin Masella, and thank you for joining me.
I'm so excited to be here.
I always enjoy talking to Demeter because it's, I find the Demeter character fascinating in itself just because it's a very dark story. Mm-hmm. And it's like this, it's just like the one universal truth is her background. Mm-hmm. And that to me is fascinating in itself. So we'll get there. But before we talk about Demeter, I want to hear your cat's history. So walk me through, When was the first time you saw it? When was the first introduction to it? How familiar you were with it before 2016?
Yeah. So I saw CATS for the first time in London, actually, when I was about 7 or 8 years old. And I was a dancer, took dance class since I was, 2 years old, waving a ribbon around the room. And I just fell in love with it. And I can't remember if I, at that point, was familiar with the music and the show, but that was the first time I had seen it. And I remember that the cats came down into the audience and I happened to be sitting on the aisle. And I remember exactly what shirt I was wearing. And one of the cats came up to me and kind of nuzzled their nose up against me. And I remember her makeup left like a little pink stain on the shoulder. And I kept that shirt forever. And I thought, oh my gosh, the cat came up to me. And I felt like I was, touched by that particular cat. And then I was one of those little girls that danced around the living room to, I'm dating myself here, the record of CATS. And my mom would always yell at me not to jump because it would make the record skip. And I just fell in love with it at such an early age. And because I grew up dancing, just loved it. And then, of course, was familiar with the VHS and watched that to no end. And then years and years later, found myself in this profession and auditioned for the revival. But yeah, the revival was the first time that I was ever in it.
I love that. So what's fascinating about that is it's Green Eyes, which is what you're talking about when they're in the crowd, is such a polarizing piece for me because I was not on the aisle and I was not thrilled and looking forward to having them jump out and scare me. I was not prepared for it. They don't do it anymore, obviously, with COVID reasons now. Mm-hmm. What was your experience like doing Green Eyes? Did you have more people that were like you that were excited to have you kind of nuzzle up to them? Or did you have more people like, I think somebody in your cast got punched at least once.
Oh gosh, I don't think I heard about that.
Scaring a child.
I loved it. I love breaking that fourth wall in a show. And it's always interesting because, you're in the moment and you're acting. And there's a moment during the naming of cats where all the cats would come into the audience. And that's where we would really, be able to see their faces and then be able to see our faces. And we're singing the whole time. So it's just amazing going through this process of you're acting and you're singing, but you're also very aware of how they're reacting. And some people loved it and are giggling. And some people you could see just kind of sit back in their seat and don't want you to come any further. It was just so interesting to see different people's reactions. I don't ever think I saw a child cry, but I'm sure it happened because, it's scary.
Did you lean in more when you saw somebody kind of leaning back? Was that like someone who's not enjoying this? I'm going to get in.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. They're coming to see the show. They don't know what to expect, but it's part of it. So it gives you that much more reason to just lean into it.
Though.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah, that was what threw me off is I didn't know what I was walking into to begin with. And I had gotten the tickets from a friend for press and for I didn't pay for them. And it was matinee. I hadn't lived in the city very long. And I walked in and, it's a really, what I loved is that my friend works in set design. It's an overwhelming and amazing set design. So I was fascinated by this and all of a sudden the lights go down and I'm thinking, oh, cool. Like facing stage what am I going to see? And then all of a sudden there's one over my shoulder, you know,
from
there's
behind,
like one right behind you. And I like, what is happening? I was just not prepared for that. And as someone who does not like to be part of the show, I like to be a spectator. It was not my favorite part of the show, but it is now a fun one to think about. And I wish they could do it again.
Yeah. I think it was cool too, because in the revival too, we the mezzanine level was also accessible. So most of the time that kind of stuff happens in the orchestra because you can come from the back of the house and you have the aisles. But I think that extra shock value of, oh gosh, now they're up in the mezzanine and roaming all about up there as well was a shock value.
Yeah. So the fun part about that is the second time I saw it, I was sitting in the mezzanine and I made a point to be like, we're not sitting on the aisle. Like, I'm not sitting on the aisle. And we were in the last row of that section. And I'm like, oh, great, we're safe. And I had my like back against the wall. And then sure enough, somebody, I don't know, I wish I knew who it was, like jumped over and was like above my head. And I'm like, oh, I picked a seat to be out of the way. And here I am getting just completely shocked by a cat.
Yeah. It's a fun part.
So let's talk about the Demeter and the backstory and what you're told. I do, like, in 2016, you're doing new choreography, you're doing some new takes on the show, but it's still like a lot of the main people are still involved, and you're getting kind of a lot of the history still brought to you. So do you remember your 3 words? And like, I'd love to hear what were you told to formulate your Demeter?
Oh gosh, my situation was slightly different because I was coming in as an injury replacement. So I didn't get as much of the backstory and the extra time that everyone took in the original cast to, ruminate about the character and all of that. I definitely had some of that, but because I was an injury replacement, it was, how fast can you learn the show and get in as soon as possible? But there were definitely a few words and things that were to me, Demeter is very skittish. She has a history with McCavity and not a happy one, although something deep inside her kind of likes it. And she's intense and has this intense bond with, I always think of her sister, Bomb Ballerina. So definitely a lot of the feline movement is influenced by that. I always had neck issues because we're always, as her, it's kind of this like back hair on the back of the spine always. I'm trying to think of what else. She's, sensual and sexual and wants to break free and be as free as she can, but is sheltered and afraid at times, which I think was the most fun playing that character because there were so many different levels of ways of being, free and open and sexy, but then also scared and a little bit more timid and shy.
Yeah. I want to go back to so one thing you said that I think is maybe, I don't know if I'd say is dramatically different, but it is a little different from what I've heard. So the one thing that always fascinates me about CATS is I've recorded hundreds of, over 100 episodes now, is that a universal truth is that Demeter was sexually abused by McCavity. And that's like one fact that there's no disputing that. You can have arguments about a lot of other headcanons, but Demeter was abused, and that one is confirmed. Yeah. But I had always heard that there's a version of Demeter and Bomb Ballerina are sisters or best friends or whatever. I like that you said sisters. But it was that Demeter had the similar relationship and Bomb Ballerina had the similar relationship, but liked it. And so Demeter didn't like it and was abused. She was liked it and abused. But you're kind of saying deep down inside that maybe there was a part of you that didn't, not the abuse, but the relationship with McCavity was maybe more positive than you kind of liked it in some capacity.
I'm sure every, actor takes it a different way, but at the end of the day, when you're singing McCavity, it's a sexy, sensual song. And to play it negatively the entire time is impossible. So there's, while she's constantly scared that he's there, whether it's that maybe there was just some, fucked up thing in her mind that draws her to McCavity while also knowing that he was horrible to her and bad for her. Not dissimilar from Phantom of the Opera, another Andrew Lloyd Webber show, where, you have this character who Christine is afraid of, but also drawn to in ways. And I think, I don't know, that's what always made it interesting for me, because yes, she was sexually abused by him, or she was attacked by him, and she's scared of him, but there's also something deep down that she's drawn to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how I always thought of it.
Yeah. I appreciate the part about the song, because the song is one that, like, as I listened to the album more and I got to know, like, when I first saw it, it was Mungo Jerry and Ripple Teaser, and that was it. That's all I remember.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously memory, but I was like, that's all that was stuck in my head. And then as I watched it more, I'm like, McCavity's song is like really, really catchy, and really, to your point, it's like, it's very charged and like sexual. And
yeah,
I hadn't thought about that like, even though there is that scared moment, you can't perform that number without having some of that energy,
of course,
part of it.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. And for me personally, it was the most fun of the numbers to do.
Yeah. So you were, I know that you were a Demeter cover, or injury replacement, and then you also had Swing, and I think you went on as Demeter, Cassandra, and Bombalurina.
Yes. And then I sang in the pit every night.
Okay. Yeah, which is a whole nother fascinating piece of Cats, that it's such a intense and difficult show to sing and dance that you need a pit. And people singing is crazy to me in itself. So my question to you is, being able to kind of go on as Demeter and Bombalurina, how was that transitioning to doing the same number side by side, different parts, and then also kind of having the different energy of having the skittish versus like the very confident and want to own the relationship? Like, what was that like, going back and forth between those two characters?
Oh, it was so fun. It's always fun when, as a performer, when you get to do multiple things and play with it. Bombalurina knows who she is and is confident in her sexuality. And like I said, Demeter's a little more timid and skittish, but it was so fun. It gets a little confusing sometimes because, you're, from a performing point of view, you're like switching lines constantly. And there was definitely a show or two where I was supposed to sing as one character, but in that split second thought I was the other and forgot and had to jump in. But in terms of playing both of those sides, I guess it really, for me, it was always that sensual, sexual side that Demeter had, just times 100.
Mm-hmm. What other relationships when you were Demeter did you play into? Like, there's the obvious McCavity and there's the obvious Bombalurina, but what other different relationships did you have to play off of, and what other like theories did you come up with the different characters to kind of tell the backstory of your relationship with them?
Yeah, Monkey Strap was always somewhat of a protector for Demeter. Both storyline and just, there were a lot of moments that we had together on the stage that felt somewhat like he was an older, like a big brother protecting. Definitely Bombalurina. I always, in my brain, kind of took the white cat as a friend, but like a strained relationship friend. You start to make up stories in your head, whether you're told them or not, depending on how the show goes and what the choreography is like and who you interact with. And, you start to make up kind of connections and as an actor. And so for me,
that's what I want to hear. Tell the stories.
That wasn't necessarily, I never got like crazy far deep into it, but I always felt like the White Cat and Demeter had this friendship that was somewhat strange because we didn't spend a lot of time with each other, but I always felt like there was this connection. So I always felt like I was looking out for her when she wasn't looking, and maybe she was looking out for me when I wasn't looking. That's, something that I made up. I'm trying to think who else. I always thought Tugger and Demeter had a thing. I always kind of thought he was her first after the bad stuff happened with McCavity, that she kind of took ownership in a sexual, sensual way with him. I think he slept with everybody. Yeah, those are kind of the big ones. I'm trying to think if there were any others.
I want to go back to a couple of them. So, because I think this to me is what's fun. So I like, let's start with the White Cat, because I do think that's one where there's not a lot of, at least to my memory, documented relationship between you and Victoria. So I do think it's kind of cool to have, like, we got each other's back. version. Did you look at it or feel maybe like as a protector of, I don't want you as kind of the new pure cat to go down my path and have that Macavity relationship? Or was it much more of like a, we're both looking out for each other?
I think probably both. I think I always kind of thought, oh, they've had a friendship and she knows what happened to Demeter. And I'm sure there was an element of protection because she's, a kitten and very open in terms of her kittenness. And I do think there was probably a part that I thought, yeah, Demeter has to kind of protect her. But I don't know why, but I always had this thing of like, we were close once, but we're not anymore, kind of strained relationships. So it was always from afar, as opposed to where Bomb and Demeter were clearly, hanging out every day and going around the same parts of the junkyard. I always made it up that Victoria and Demeter had this kind of strained relationship, but Demeter was still kind of looking out for her from afar.
Okay. I like that. I'd never really thought about the two. Those are two relationships I don't think I've thought about like at all. And so it's kind of interesting to hear. What about, I want to go back to Monkey Trap because I know there is some thought that Demeter and Monkey Trap are actually together. And then I heard you said big brother. So was it more of a brother-sister relationship, or was it much more of I know you talked about Tugger being the first sexual relationship post, but was Monkey Trap like a want to be with Demeter partnership, but isn't in his friend zone big brother type of thing?
For me, it was always a big brother type of thing. Maybe that's because I was good friends with the with the actor that played it, and I always kind of thought of him as more of a brotherly relationship than a sexual relationship. I'm sure for people who really, got to know even Jilly, the original choreographer's idea of the backstory, I'm sure maybe there were moments where Monk and Demeter were together. But for me, it always felt like a protective big brother kind of thing. There were a lot of moments in the show where he would, choreographically wise, like do something that to me just felt much more protector, brotherly. He knows the backstory. He knows what happened. He's always kind of the one when, we're scared that Macavity's there, that's being the person on guard, in my mind, to protect the people that have negatively been affected by Macavity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. This is where this always gets so very strange for me, because there is no CATS family tree, and I've tried to put it together, and there is no definitive answer. I've asked people that know, and there is no definitive answer. But hearing you say that Monk is brother, and then hearing you say that Tugger is love interest, but then it's pretty clear, and Macavity was love interest, but I think it's like pretty universally accepted that Monk, Macavity, and Tugger are three brothers and sons of old Deuteronomy. So that gets very strange when you start looking at it from that angle. And I'm sure that's why they're just cats and not people.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of those shows where, like, depending on who you talk to and which iteration, some people, I know a lot of people that did the original show in some version had a plethora of backstory, and it was very definitive. And I think for the revival, although like I said, I wasn't there from day one when they were in rehearsals, it was a little bit looser, I think, for the cast to kind of make their own backstories. Because at the end of the day, they're cats singing about cat things.
Yeah.
And I think the backstory was more for the actor to, we always joke, like, people say Cats is about nothing unless you're a part of the cast and the backstory that was told to you by the previous people before. It's kind of like this, which is why you're doing this podcast. It's kind of this hidden secret relationship, but it's like telephone, like through the years, it changes for reasons, for new people joining or different iterations of the show being done. And
that's so spot on, because I've been joking, when I started this, it was a joke, but then all of a sudden now I feel like I'm documenting history of like all the various productions. And I ask the same type of questions to everybody because I get so many vastly different answers. And it is a game of telephone, and there is not a consistent. I've talked to people who have produced it. I've talked to people who have been in various productions. I've talked to people who like remember everything about it and people who remember very little about those things. I talked to somebody recently on a Royal Caribbean cruise who got a single paragraph that was like 8 sentences, and that was it. And it's because, you know, it's not spoken. There's not the dialogue that's there to kind of answer those questions. So it's the emotion and feeling and the part that you need as an actor. And if it's not given to you, you need to create to be able to do this.
Exactly.
So many, you know, 8 times a week. And so it's what's made this really fun. And it's what's fun too, because when you start looking at the absurdity of those backstories, it is crazy to start putting those together. Because it's just a very, like, the Jellicles are not, it's not normal. It's cats, you know, it's not a normal world. And it's really funny to think about that, which is why I'm still here doing this.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
What about relationship with Grizabella? Because I think that's the other one that's like, she comes back. I have always wondered, was Grizabella potentially a mom that abandoned any of these kittens and cats? And it's like, is that a scenario you ever thought of or played? I know I didn't think about as much. It's definitely a theory for me for Victoria, but I hadn't thought about as much for Bomb and Demeter of whether it's like this was their friend that went off or this was potentially their mom that abandoned them.
Yeah, it's interesting as Demeter, you have this relation. I always felt like Demeter had this relationship with Grizz where she had this really strong hate and rage for her and didn't exactly know why. But then also was one of the few that felt bad and in some ways understood her. So I never really put a label on it, whether she was a mother that had abandoned or I always also somewhere in my mind kind of felt like there was a like Grizabella and McCavity connection that interested but also spooked Demeter, given what she went through. Like I said, I never got super specific with that, but I definitely know that there was an intense dislike, but then on the flip side, also this slight weird understanding and pity for her.
Yeah. It's
like
almost like
Demeter as a whole, like she's like 180, she's flip-flopping 180, you know, she's right down the middle, like scared and shy, but also very sexual and hates that character or cat, but also feels bad for them. You know, I feel like she's just not bipolar, but just a little all over the place with her emotions. It's like one extreme or the other.
Yeah. There's a little bit of Demeter potentially following Grizz's footsteps. Like, because if you do take the McCavity, I've always thought that when Grizz left, she went to be part of McCavity's crime gang. Like he brought her out. He ruined the family and relationship. She did a bunch of terrible things for him away from the group. And then now she's coming back for her forgiveness. And I think that there's some potential that Demeter could take that same path if she's not careful. And that's what she has, at least a Bombalurina to try to protect her. Like she's got this person that's keeping her from going that far down. So that's where it becomes, to me, an interesting question of like, is it mother-daughter following in mom's footsteps? Or is it, this is just a role model that I don't want to follow, that I used to look up to, but now could very well become me?
Yeah, absolutely. Both of those things I think work for the intent of how she feels towards her.
I love it. Yeah. It's fun because like I've definitely clearly now, like me and the fans have spent more time thinking about this, and it's like, this is what I think.
Impressed.
And then you still
like,
go on.
I want you to tell me what you think, like all the amazing things that you've heard, because I'm sure you've heard many of the episodes.
Yeah, when we stop recording, I'll give you a couple of the things I've made up that I've said many times on here. That my joke has been, and I'm my goal one day is to do it, and I don't know if I might get the opportunity. My goal is to just go tell the tour or current cast or some version of like, here's what I think you should think of that won't change the show, because like none of this is stuff that's going to dramatically change the show. But like I want to go and say, hey, Victoria, Grizz is your mom tonight. When she comes out, I want you to just look at her as if that's your mom. And that's the only difference. The rest of this stuff isn't going to change. But I have like one for every cat that I want to be like, here's what I think you can go do tonight. And I want to hear if it lands or if it doesn't land. Because there is so many versions of this that could be there. And like you could go on and say she's mom tonight. She's not mom tomorrow. Monk is brother today. Monk is love interest tomorrow. Like there's just so many opportunities to kind of tinker with it that does not change the plot, does not change the story, does not change the dancing and singing, but changes maybe a little bit of the energy that night. And I would assume helps as an actor doing it 8 times a week.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It makes it fun and fresh, but also keeps it in the confines of the show. And, yeah.
Yeah. And the only people I'll notice are the super fans, because there are a group of fans that will recognize that. And the rest of the group is going to be like me my first time, which is just like, what the fuck did I just watch?
Yeah.
You know, like, I don't know what I'm experiencing.
Yeah.
Here, what I couldn't have named half the cats for you, let alone their relationship with each other on stage.
Right. Oh no, the super fans are real. I mean, I'm sure you've had lots of encounters with them, but we had a group of people who I think came to every show, or at least 3 a week, sometimes in costume and makeup, and got to know people in the cast, got to come backstage sometimes.
They called themselves the Junkyard. And I've interviewed one from the Junkyard. And they saw the show 88 times.
Wow.
I did the math, and that's 15% of the performances that went on the revival. And so, but the thing is, they're super fans, and they're so fun for me to talk to because they have an opinion on what the definitive answer to these things are. Whether the cast or other people agree, they have their version. And so it's my favorite question I always ask them is, where am I wrong? Like, what am I getting wrong? Because I don't know. I just am kind of saying, here's what I'm seeing, or I've heard enough variations of this that I think this could happen. And they are passionate, and it's fun.
Yeah. It's super fun.
We'll be back for more of this catastrophe after a short break.
So I want to pivot because you are going to be going into Bad Cinderella, Andrew Webber's new show on Broadway here. And by the time that this is releases, I hope we'll hopefully be in previews in there, but I know you're in rehearsals right now. So what has that experience been being in another Andrew Webber show? And then 2, what can someone expect to come see it? Especially, this is a lot of Cats fans, but I think this is also a lot of just theater and Andrew Lloyd Webber fans. What is the show going to bring to the Broadway stage?
Yeah, this is my 3rd Andrew Lloyd Webber show now. I did the national tour of Evita and Cats on Broadway, and now Bad Cinderella. And I think what he's amazing at, he's amazing at a lot of things, but is just having big sweeping scores. And the music just goes on and just is big and lush. And this is one of those musicals. A little more edgy, a little more modern, but the music is just beautiful. And I think in terms of what I've seen so far, the sets are big and colorful and bright. The costumes are, again, colorful and big and bright. It's just going to be kind of like a bang of a show. Very different from what they did in London, because they did the show in London, and I think they learned a lot, and it was a great production for them, but they've made some changes both musically, visually, and artistically. And I think it's just going to be, it's a spin on the fairy tale of Cinderella. So it's not the same Cinderella as the Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella story. She's an outcast and a bit edgier and doesn't really care until she does. There's some fun storyline things that I can't really give away, but are definitely different and a little shocking in moments. So you got to come see the show to find out. And yeah, I just think it's a mixture of like a good old fashioned musical, but mixed with kind of a modern edgy feel. Those are the 2 words that I kind of always come back to, because it's just going to be a little different than what you think it is.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about because I know that there was the West End version, but I know this is different. Mm-hmm. It seems like this is some parts the same, but this is a new version of that, because there was a lot of changes to this. And it is the same thing. It's like it's Cinderella, which I would hope most people are going to know that story, but it's not what you're going to see. It's a different play using the characters and the source material as I would say an anchor, but not like exactly what you're just not going to see a version of it.
Yeah, no, it's a completely it's a reinvented version of Cinderella. There's still the Cinderella who's a bit of an outcast and doesn't get accepted. And in the original production, Prince Charming is the prince that she eventually, falls in love with. And that's shifted a little bit. There's another prince, Prince Sebastian, who's Prince Charming's brother, who we find out is also a bit of an outcast and doesn't really like his position and want to be in his position. And how that relationship kind of unfolds and comes together. And I think it's going to still have that same fairy tale, fable feeling to it, but in a different way. And also with, beautiful score by Andrew Lloyd Webber, because he just writes beautiful music.
Yeah, I am very excited to see it. I know we will link, and anybody in New York should go see it and come see it. I have been it's been weeks now, and we're recording this long before the show's open. I've seen the signage is up on the theater, and it's like I walked around a bunch of times, so it's out there, and I think people are eager to see previews and everything for it to open here when it does.
Yeah. Our press team is amazing, and they're already doing interviews with the cast and press photos, and we had our little housewives press, not release, but press social media videos that are going around to just kind of give a sense of a little bit of the show.
Yeah, even the announcement kind of made a bang on social media because of the way they teased it. I'm not a TikTok influencer, so I didn't get the personal invite. But I know a lot of the theater influencers got the invites, and then they, the whole kind of like introduction. It was very well conceived and definitely created buzz, which has made it fun. And I think I like anytime I hear edgy and modern. Like I think that's a fun way to take something, especially Disney, something that's been done and is a known story, to take a different look on it. And then to your point, adding Andrew Lloyd Webber's talent to add to it will make it so fun.
Absolutely. I think it's a fine line when you're reinventing a story that everybody knows so well, that, the option is to either do a complete 180 and make it completely different, which is not exactly what's happening in this version, but it's enough of the same and enough different where I feel like people who really love the pure story of Cinderella will be interested and understand it, and people who are kind of sick and tired of that same old Cinderella fairy tale story are going to have some new elements to get them excited and into it.
That's fun. Well, it is, by the time this releases, it'll either be opened or opening soon. So I encourage anybody, again, who's in New York, or anybody who has the means and the ability to go see Bad Cinderella. We'll link everything too, so you can get tickets. I want to shift to some rapid fire, some ending things, so we can talk about the most important question of this podcast, which is the Jellicle choice. But before we get there, if you could go on for one cat for any night, forget male, female, vocal range, dance, whatever, just you could go on for one track, one night, who would you want to go on as?
Oh, Tugger. Tugger, absolutely. Just the freedom to do whatever the hell you want to do on stage within the confines of what was given. But I mean, there were moments where Tyler Haynes, who was our amazing Tugger, I would just look over and he'd be like licking his leg up on the top of the oven, because he just doesn't give a shit. He's like, not Tyler, but the character. Like, that character just doesn't give a shit. He thinks he's hot as shit, and like he can just do whatever the hell he wants, and gets like a little bit of freedom of that, which I thought would just be so fun to do.
It's the one character that really has a lot of creative license, more so than I think most of the rest of the cats, where you have like you have your swim lanes, I'll call it, that you can stay within. But it seems like Tyler, I've talked to Tyler about this, he can kind of just go do whatever he wants. Like when he went to the crowd, and there's like comments on YouTube, he like sat in people's laps, and he like ate the popcorn and like or whatever. Yep. It's like he could do whatever he wanted. So I love that answer. It's everything that of my social media and everything. It's all named Rum Tum Tugger. Everything is that. Yeah. So I agree. That would be my answer.
Yes.
Who are your favorite and least favorite cats? Not characters, they're not characters, not actors. Always clarify that.
My favorite and least favorite. I mean, I'm obviously partial to Demeter and Bomb because I just love their characters. Mungo Jerry and Rumple Teaser, I think, are just kind of annoying. And I would never want to play them. Both just because they're
Demeter answer.
Yeah. Yeah, they were kind of like the annoying kittens.
That's the song that got stuck in my head the most.
Yeah. Yeah. To sing, to listen to, or just in general?
All the above, just from the show.
Oh gosh. I mean, I love McCavity because I love singing it, but I love, we call it Little Memory. It's the top of Act 2 where all the cats sing a little bit of memory. And from a personal point of view, we're all kind of just, the staging is that we're all kind of later on the stage and close to the audience, and we're just singing out to the audience. And it's kind of the only one time in the show where, of course, you're performing because you're on a stage and you're performing, but it was like the smallest amount of performing. And for me as an actor to just look out into the audience and be able to look at people's faces. And I always kind of pictured myself as a little girl sitting in the audience watching myself on stage or watching someone on stage. I love in shows when you have those kind of quiet moments of just looking out into the audience and having that connection, or just being able to have a moment of like gratitude. For me, that was always a really special moment in the show and a special song to sing. And you get to sing a little bit of Memory, which, who doesn't want to sing Memory?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting to hear that, because it is a show where there's so much going on stage at all times. To have kind of that quieter moment that's not the intense like piece of Grizabella coming back on stage, type of thing is super interesting. I love hearing that. My last rapid fire question before the most important one: if you could cast one of the cats in Bad Cinderella, who would fit best in this story?
Oh, that's a good one. I could cast one of the cats in Bad Cinderella. Okay, I'm going to think about this for a second. It would have to be Bomb. It would have to be Bomb Ballerina, because well, the town of Belleville, where Bad Cinderella takes place, everything is perfect, and anyone who's different does not belong. And we're very sure about that. And we're very confident, and we're very put together and sexy and beautiful. And so to me, that just kind of encompasses what Bomb is. She's just kind of a confident, strong, sexy cat.
Yeah. I think when you said, your explanation of it earlier was modern, edgy, and confident, confident and a little bit more. I immediately thought, oh, that's Cinderella's Bomb Ballerina. It's just it's exactly like that. So I agree, and I will revisit this with you after I get to see the show, and we will casting everybody with you. Okay, the most important question.
Yeah.
I have argued at length that I don't think Grizabella is the right Jellicle choice. So I want to hear, do you want to defend Grizabella, or are you going to defend somebody else as your Jellicle choice?
I always thought that she was the right choice, because in my mind, she's gone through some horrible things and is the outcast of this group. And I don't know, she sings a really amazing song. So who wouldn't deserve to get to go to be reborn again after singing that?
It's clear the more I talk to cast members that a lot of you have just I never thought a different version, because it's you did this for hundreds of times. You got to go on and choose her, and then there's some who are oh no, especially a Jelly Alarm is I'm picking Jess. But here's my theory for you now, and this is a new theory I hadn't thought about until you talked about earlier. I think that you want Grizabella as Demeter because you are on her same path. And since the Heaviside layer is a reward and something that's desirable, as Demeter, you're following her so much, in the sense that you had went off in the cavity, this might be your future. And so it's I want to pick her because when I come back and I have that moment, I don't want to not get picked myself.
Yeah, maybe. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, after hearing that makes a lot of sense.
You're just like, she came back in, she sings it, and I was fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, I also think, like, you know, you're taught that, like, that is the one who was deserving. But I mean, I could see how because Gus is like such a grandfather of everyone, you know, and I could see how he would deserve it. But I don't know. I think Grizabella was the right choice. Okay. I think in my mind, she's gone through like such ups and downs in her life as a cat that she deserves to come back one more time.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. Yeah. But I do think that she should stay for the year and go next year. Okay. Spend time with the fam. Okay. Have a birthday.
I get that.
Go to Thanksgiving, you know, you know, get to do a year's worth of what you've missed and then go next.
Right. All right. Well, maybe in the revival, or not the revival, but, you know, the Cats Part 2.
Cats 2. I have a lot of.
It'll start with her not getting picked and being forced to stay for another year and see what happens then.
I still think the best Cats 2 is she gets picked, but you get a Ghost of Christmas Past version where she goes and sees the impact of her being picked and comes back and decides if she wants to still go. That's my Cats 2. And I think there's a lot you can do with that as material, because then you can play into all of the different unknown relationships that you can take a step further the next night or later on that she can come back and see by her not getting picked. Like, does Gus make it the next year? Maybe we have to go to his funeral. Like, what happens to McCavity? Like, there's a lot of different things you can come back to see with her decision being made.
You're onto something there.
The challenge is I don't know how to write anything musically, cannot choreograph anything, and just have a very raw idea that I would love somebody to run with. And if someone wants to, I'll happily consult.
It would be an interesting book. You know, for like those people that, you know, you could like go through these are the different backstories that I've heard of cats, which I'm sure a lot of people would be surprised about. And then, you know, this is what would happen if it changed the ending.
Yeah, one day. Until then, I'm going to keep having everybody tell me the telephone of cats until we get slightly closer to a definitive answer.
I can't wait till episode 400 where it's just all over the place.
If I'm at 400, I have other questions. This has been so fun. How can people stay in touch with you? Everything else you're doing? Obviously, I'll link the Bad Cinderella stuff, but social media, and how they can follow you. Yeah,
follow me on Instagram at Robin Masella, just my name. I post a lot of, you know, theater career stuff, and I try to post as much insider backstage things as I can when I'm doing a show. So that's always fun to share with people.
Awesome. We'll link everything there as well. This has been so fun. Thank you so much for coming on, and excited to see you in Bad Cinderella.
Yeah, come see us at the Imperial.
Amazing. And thanks everyone else for listening to this episode of The Wrong Cat Died, the podcast breakdown of the catastrophe. To follow along, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, or anywhere else to listen to podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at The Wrong Cat Died, or check out our website, thewrongcatdied.com.